Okay, so kind of most recently, Donald Trump was in a CNN interview with Anderson Cooper to and it was definitely highlighted because he definitely expressed his opinion on being okay with Japan and countries like Saudi Arabia getting nuclear weapons. And the reason why he was kind of saying this was because he thought that we're spending too much money on military aid, and kind of giving these countries nuclear weapons would stop us from using a massive amount of resources and just time protecting these countries. So do you guys have any ideas on, do you think just military aid, do you think it's just a small part of the entire military aid budget, military budget, or do you think there are ways to dramatically reduce military aid? Because currently we have about, 2015 showed that we spent about $35 billion of the military fund on military aid, such as training programs, sending soldiers in training programs across the world. And then we also have 49,000 U.S. troops in Japan, 28,000 in South Korea, 38,000 in Germany. Do you think these are large military numbers in countries? So they all kind of want to start with that.
Well, first, like you said specifically that Donald Trump was talking about how we should give them nuclear weapons so that they don't need our protection. I think that's probably a terrible idea. Like, giving people nuclear weapons doesn't just make them protect themselves, it makes them mess with other people. Like, hey, I have a nuclear weapon, don't mess with me. Like, if we gave Japan full nuclear capabilities, nobody else in the region has real good nuclear capabilities. The U.S. has a different level of nuclear capability than any country anywhere near there, and Japan just being able to, if they fork up enough money to be able to just buy the best nuclear weapons out there, would be probably pretty bad. Japan would have more than just self-defense, they would have the ability to put themselves in other people's business, which would in turn lead to us probably getting involved again. So I think that idea, on its own, is a terrible idea. But I do think that we shouldn't be selling people nuclear weapons. I think we should be moving away from a world where everyone has nuclear weapons. That's probably not in our best interest. Where if one person mishandles their nuclear weapon, someone just leaves a nuke on a shelf somewhere, and some terrorist comes and takes it, then it's it's an issue. You don't want terrorists or anyone who's going to actually use them to have access to them. So there's no reason to share them and just let people buy them. Some things shouldn't just be free market. You shouldn't just be able to buy nuclear weapons.
There should not be.
Let's say ISIS comes up with enough money to buy a nuclear weapon, okay.
I would agree with Shane on those parts. I think that arming Saudi Arabia with nuclear weapons is a terrible idea to save the health in the region. I'd say that Japan is a lot more stable bet, and I would not be opposed to them developing nuclear weapons, but I would not hand them to them, mostly just because China's right across the street, and then you have North Korea over there. So if the U.S. were to gift nuclear weapons to Japan, I think that would send a terrible message to that region, South China Sea and everything. Yeah.
I could see a major conflict starting with that.
Oh, the other thing I was going to say is, I'd say we can probably take the soldiers out of Japan and Germany. I mean, World War II ended 60 years ago, almost 70. And again, I think those countries are stable enough that we don't need a military presence there anymore. And I think we have good enough diplomatic relations with them that a military presence isn't necessary. I'd say South Korea, we might want to keep a military presence there. Just because North Korea keeps flexing its muscles in a while, we could eliminate them completely with a push of the button. That's probably not the best course to take.
Well, I think the biggest argument for people saying we need troops in Japan is just them saying it's more of having a strategic outpost. If there's anything that happens in the area, we can get to it quicker than the United States. But I would definitely say 49,000 troops, that's definitely just an overstatement. I think it's, and not just with military aid, but I think we can show this in just the military in general. I think as we kind of move on to the future, really having a massive infantry is less necessary. I mean, this isn't really World War One anymore. We don't have massive infantry units fighting. You know, most of our action we're using technology drone strikes for, and if there is infantry, we don't have, you know, hundreds of troops running at a different military base. I mean, it's really, I mean, we would not, if we did need a strategic base in Japan, it would definitely not be 49,000, that would be necessary.
And even Oregon has it too. We have Hawaii right there as well, which is not terribly close, but it's not like trying to ship people over from the mainland. So it would just be like a halfway house, but giving them enough autonomy to get up there for everyone.
Like, even though Donald Trump kind of said, I completely did not agree about the nuclear weapons. I mean, I think he was kind of the first in the Republican Party, other than Rand Paul, that kind of started an open dialogue about how much money we're spending on military needs, even though he only mentioned kind of foreign aid, I mean, which is only 35 billion of our hundreds of billions within the military. And, you know, I mean, you compare this to Marco Rubio, who is kind of talking about $1 trillion military plan, which is insane when you consider the amount of U.S. debt that we have right now. So,
I mean, I agree that we need to cut military spending, that Rubio or Cruz who say, you know, our military is weak, we need better. It's like, look, we still have the number one military in the world, man. And I'm not saying that we like stop unless someone overtake us, but I'm saying that our competitor's pretty far behind. I mean, I don't come out statistics on that, they might not be. But, I mean, we should definitely keep an eye on other country militaries. But I think at this point we can cut back on spending.
No, yeah, because we definitely have other things that we definitely need to start kind of working on, like our whole education system. I think that definitely needs some work. Cut the military a little bit, pour more into education, so that way maybe we have more educated people, we won't necessarily have to fight so much. I'm sorry, I've never hit you, so.
Yeah.
I think like the question itself about like the U.S. giving weapons of mass destruction and like, the U.S. trading weapons in general has a lot of other implications besides just nuclear weapons. Like we give weapons to all kinds of countries and we don't necessarily follow the same treaties that other countries do. The U.S. is one of the only countries in the world, there's like 80 countries actually that don't sign the ban on cluster munitions, and the U.S. is like by far the largest member of those 80 countries. Like the rest of the world is against the use of cluster munitions, and then there's the U.S. who makes all the cluster munitions, so we don't ban them. And cluster munitions are basically just bombs that they blow up in the air, and then they turn into like 400 other bombs, and the casualty rate on those is 98% civilians, so it's killing like children, women, and we sell them like to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia's used them in Yemen for like 20 years, and they've killed like 6,000 women and children just since then, and it's U.S. weapons. Like we sell to them because we want to be good friends with them because they give us all our oil, but it's kind of ethically not okay to do that because there is no use for those kinds of weapons except for killing civilians. Like 98% of the weapons or the damage that those do is just civilian casualties. Like, so I think the U.S. should kind of put a little bit more restriction on what we sell to people in general, especially not nuclear weapons.
Some of those cluster munition things can like do more harm than like 49,000
Yeah.
troops can, you know?
Like,
Yeah, like which ones are more expensive too?
a lot of the problem with it is actually that the bombs get stuck in the ground, and because it's like 400 different bombs, if one of them doesn't go off, then they end up in the ground. And then when kids come along and find it on the ground, they touch the bomb, it goes off. So it destroys the region for like a significant amount of time until someone can go and clean up all the bombs that didn't go off. Like they're just terrible, and we still sell them because we can make money off of it. So I think there should definitely be limits on what exactly we're selling.
There's a veteran by the name of Yesenia Rodriguez, and she gives speeches based on how it is that we need to cut back on our military spending.
through her time in service, she and a lot of troops that she was deployed with discussed how it is that a lot of the things they have seen that have scarred them could have been avoided if the United States had more updated strategies, or even with the fact that there was less spending. The biggest thing that they discuss is their slogan is don't thank me for your service. Instead, push for less of my service to be added. And the biggest argumentation that they have is that the United States spends all of this money, training people, sending them out, and then whenever they get there, it's more situations that they're cleaning up messes the United States have made so that no one else finds out the United States have made them. And because of that, it's not really helping anyone. They're not even fighting for a greater good or speaking on just protecting the United States democratic system or the president or whatever it is. And it's hurting people because sometimes these weapons are extremely old. People don't know how to work them because they're no longer being trained on them and they've moved past that. So they still go off and they still kill people, and there are all these things that occur that scar them, and not necessarily because they were in war, but because they were just in the middle of nowhere, just kind of chilling, and then one day happened along something that was there from years and years ago, and they lose a lot of their friends and people that they have become acquainted with while there. So they push for the biggest action on cutting military budget because of the fact that it's not something we necessarily need. Like you briefly said, the United States is leading with the biggest, strongest military, and it's not something that we need to continuously be pouring so much money into. Like you also stated, there are many things the United States need to refocus a lot of their aid on, or a lot of our financial budget. There are lots of services that everyone already agrees need to be cut on, but the military budget is definitely one of the biggest things. So when discussing the entire phrasing of everything, first starting with should the United States continue using this beg, barter, buy system of nuclear weapons? No, it should not. And so should the U.S. Cut the military budget? Yes, it should, because we are massively spending a lot of money and not only hurting us ourselves with how much we're paying and not really seeing an output of good things here in the United States, but with the people we are putting in the position and shipping them off to these different countries where they're not necessarily needed. So even though it's a strategy for just in case, the just in case shouldn't really outweigh the amount of pain that we are putting our own citizens in.
And it's kind of funny because a lot of the issues that we have today are actually because of what the U.S. has done in the past. We think that whenever we go into another country and we bomb the crap out of them and destroy their lives,
And,
that they're just going to be oh, okay, sorry, we did this wrong, United States. We will, become capitalist. We will become everything you want us to be. But that's not what actually happens. They end up hating us because we, drone strikes, a large portion of the people that we kill drone strikes are actually innocent, and they're just collateral damage. So we kill terrorists with the drone strikes, and sometimes there's an acceptable rate of casualty for civilians, right?
We
And
have a lot to fix in our own country first, I feel like.
So $35 billion in military aid is a lot.
And that's just
That's
foreign aid,
ridiculous.
right? Was that
Yeah, that
foreign aid?
was just,
That's just
of
for
the military funding, that was just military aid. That just means overall military training and just kind of the military soldiers we have within foreign countries.
Think of how many homeless people we could feed and shelter with that money.
solve
There's a
the
jet.
poverty problem.
There's a
here in
jet
the
called
United
the-
States.
There's a jet called the F-35 that they've been working on for I don't know how long, but it's been a while, and it's it's supposed to overtake the F-16, I believe, in terms of being our military jet, that we go to. It's supposed to be a better fighter jet than the F-16. I think it's the F-16, but they've been researching it, and it's cost $2 trillion so far. Or
Was it for one, just one plane?
maybe, I don't know if it's 2 trillion or several.
I heard it was
Hundred
like
billion. Yeah, it was trillions, which is just so hard to imagine. But they found that it could have bought a mansion for every homeless person in the US with the amount of money that we spent on it. And then what's the real kicker here is that the F-35 is actually a lot slower and it can't turn very quickly and it's a terrible plane. And so it's actually worse than the one that it was supposed to replace.
It's like a huge waste of money.
It was all a waste of money because the planes we have now are actually in a lot of ways better than the one that we could have housed every person in the US with the money that we wasted on that.
And one of its like earliest studies actually showed during the flight, it said it was having trouble with rain, and just that was like enough to
How do we figure that out? Spend another $200 billion to fight rain?
Yeah, there was, just during the study, it said, yeah, rain's just really slowing this flight down. It's just really affecting flight.
There's two elements of nature, is it really necessary